be using that quadratic formula. There's one of those bubbles right here so that you can write the formula in there. So remember, our formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. And remember, our a, b, and c come from our equation. A is the one in front of x squared, b is the one in front of x, and c is the constant all by itself. But before we can start number 1, everything has to be on the same side of the equal sign. So how could I fix this? What would I need to do? Rect. So that'll go away. And I can't actually add 5 to either of those terms because the other two have x's in them. So I'm just going to tag it on the end. So I'll have 2x squared minus 6x plus 5 equals 0. And this would be my A, my B, and my C. Right? Okay, so now we're just going to plug it into the formula. We'll have x equals, the formula says negative b, but what's our b? Negative 6. So 2 negatives will make it positive 6. Then we have plus or minus the square root of b squared. You guys said b was negative 6, so we got negative 6 squared. Make sure you put parentheses around it since it's negative. If you're going to type it in your calculator, you've got to have the parentheses. Minus 4 times a, what's a? Good. Times c, which is good. And this is all over 2 times a, which you guys said was 2. Okay, so now we just have to simplify what we can. We can't change anything about that 6 out in front, so we're going to keep the 6 plus or minus. We're going to simplify what's under the radical. So we do the exponent first. What is negative 6 squared? You've got to put the parentheses around it because your calculator won't pick up. But what does it mean to square something?
36.
It's going to be positive because when you square something, you're multiplying it times itself, right? A negative 6 times a negative 6 is going to be a positive. We got positive 36. And then we're going to multiply. So negative 4 times 2 and negative 8 times 5. Good. And this is all over 2 times 2, which is just good. All right, and the last thing I can do under that radical is subtract my numbers, right? What is 36 minus 40? Negative 4. So everything else stays the same. We've got 6 plus or minus. But now underneath that radical, we just have negative 4 all over 4. Okay, now we have to simplify what's under the radical if we can, right? We know we can't type this in our calculator because it's just going to say error, right, or no real numbers. So, from what we learned yesterday, how can I rewrite that? What do I have to do when there's a negative under the radical? I. So I would pull out an I. And then it's a positive 4 under there, right? Is 4 going to give me any pairs? What am I going to get? 2 and 2. And there's no leftovers, right? So I'm just going to take out that 2. So this becomes 2i. So now I'm going to rewrite this and replace the square root of negative 4 with 2i. So I'm going to have 6 plus or minus 2i all over 4. Okay, and then the last step is to see if we can simplify our 3 terms here. Can we simplify all 3 of those numbers by something? Oh, well. Right. So 6 divided by 2 is going to leave us with, good, plus or minus. 2 divided by 2 is just, so I'll have 1i over calculator, so that's my final answer right there. Remember, that is still two separate solutions, right? One for 3 plus I divided by 2, and one for 3 minus I divided by 2.
Okay, the rest of it.
No, you can leave it like this. You don't have to split them if we're not actually going to type them. All right. Let's do number 2. All right, so this one's already good to go. We don't have to move anything around. So we can just go ahead and start plugging it into the quadratic formula. So, formula says negative b, and what's our b? Negative 4. 2 negatives make a, good. So yeah, 4 plus or minus the square root. You guys said b was negative, so make sure you put it in parentheses. Squared minus 4 times a, what's a? Times c, which is, good, all over 2a. All right, and now we just start to simplify. So there's nothing we can change about the 4 out in front, so we just keep the 4 plus or minus, and we start under the radical. So first we're going to square negative 4. What should we get? Positive 16. Then we multiply our numbers. So we've got negative 4 times 8. Good. Times 5. Right. So we have negative 160. And this is all over 2 times 8, which is just 10. And then the last thing we can simplify under that radical is to subtract, right? So what is 16 minus 160? Good. So we've got 4 plus or minus the square root of negative 144 all over 16. So what should we do now? Right, we want to simplify this. So if I have a negative 144 under my radical, what would be the first thing we need to do? Good. So I take out the I, and now it's a positive 144. And does 144 have a square root? What is it? 12. So this just becomes 12I. Right? So that would branch into 12 and 12, and there's my pair, no leftovers. Okay, so I can rewrite this and replace my radical with 12I. So we're going to have 4 plus or minus 12I all over 16. Okay, now what could we do? Right, by what number can we simplify? Good. So if I simplify 4 by 4, I'm just left with, good. And if I simplify 12, I'm left with, good, all over, good. And that's the most that we can do. So there would be my answer. Okay. All right, number 3. Is everything where it needs to be, or do we need to rearrange? So what would I do? Very good. And again, we can't combine it with anything, so we just tag it on the end. So we're going to have negative 5x squared plus 12x minus 8 equals 0. And now that we have everything in the right spot, we can tell what our a, b, and c are, and we'll just plug it into the formula. So I'll have x equals what? Good. Then what? Mm-hmm. Uh-huh. Very good. And that's all over. Very good. All right. And then we start to simplify. So we keep the negative 12 in front. And what do I simplify first under my radical? Right. And what is 12 squared? Very good. And then we have to multiply our numbers, right? So we've got negative 4 times negative 5, which is going to give us positive 20. So then we got 20 times negative 8. So minus 160 all over. Very good. Okay? And then what would we want to do? Mm-hmm. So what will we be left with under our radical? Very good. And this is all over that negative 10. Okay, now what should we do? Right, we're going to simplify this. So we have negative 16 under there. So our first step would be to pull out. Good. Okay, and then we got to make some pairs, right? Does 16 have any pairs? What should we break it into? Perfect. And like for us, no leftovers, right? So this just becomes 4i. So we've got negative 12 plus or minus 4i all over negative 10. Are we done? By what number? Good. So this is going to become what? Very good. And then we're done. Okay, I want you guys to try number 4, and then we're going to check it together. So first thing we need to do is plug everything in. So what did we have when we plugged everything into our equation? What did we start with? start to simplify. So when I square 4 under that radical, what am I going to have? And then when I multiply all my numbers, very good. All over. And when I subtract the numbers under my radical, we're left with. And we actually already had that exact radical up above, right? So we know that the square root of -4 is going to simplify to, right, so this is equal to 2i. So I'm going to rewrite it. Got -4 plus or minus 2i all over -2. And then what was our last step? Right. So my final answer would be very good. All right. Now, if I have these two negatives here, then I just would need to keep in mind, like, -2 divided by -1 could be +2, and I would just have a -1 with my I that I'm dividing by. So on a multiple choice test, it could be written as just